G'day poker people, welcome back. My tourist visa was about to expire in the United States and I wanted to show my girlfriend the motherland of Australia, which left me with 10 days to grind poker in the Seminole Hard Rock Tampa, and boy was it an action-packed 10 days. Let's not waste any more time and get straight into the gambling. Let's go! We're kicking things off with a button straddle and then a passive big blind limps, and I'm under the gun with pocket sevens. I raise it up to 60, definitely on the looser side with the button straddle on, but folding is boring. I raise it up to 60 and then a tight aggressive hijack calls and a tight aggressive cutoff 3-bets to 210. The action folds back to me, and being that we're over 1.4k effective with the villain, I think this is a good spot to set mine with my sevens here. I throw in the call, as does the hijack as well. So we go 3 ways to a flop of 7. Yes! 3 deuce rainbow, so let's go, we hit the set. Still got to check it over to the pre-flop aggressor in flow, as does the hijack, and then the pre-flop aggressor c-bets, they make it 200. Now the action's back on me here, and I think it's an interesting spot, whether we just want to go all in here or just flat. The main reason I would like going all in is, well, I mean for value of course, but to really stack those pocket jacks, pocket queens type hands, so they're going to be scared off if the turn is an ace or a king. Having said that though, definitely a lot of merit to flatting. Might induce the hijack to overcall with the worst hand, particularly the overpairs in their range, which obviously they're going to fold if I check raise. And additionally, the SPR, if I do flat, is going to be about 1 with the pre-flop 3-better, so it's not like we can't get all in on later streets anyway if they do have like a nutted overpair. And maybe potentially a bluff, not that I'm super expecting to see that in Tampa to be honest, but I do decide to flat, mix in the trap, and then the hijack folds unfortunately. But I can't complain too much because I'm heads up to the turn, which is the 3 of diamonds. As if our set wasn't enough, we now have a full house. Still check it over to the villain who checks back. So definitely didn't want to see the check back there. Maybe they do have ace king and they're just trying to take a free card, which we would be very happy for them to hit, by the way. Regardless, the river is the 10 of hearts. Now the action's on me here, and I think we have to stop trapping at this point. They probably wouldn't check back with an overpair, but we do run the risk that they bet small and then fold to our check raise all in. Whereas if we just shove now, they're just going to snap me off with all their overpairs. Plus, like I said, it's pretty uncommon that people do bluff in Tampa, even when you give them a bit of rope. So I don't really expect to check to induce. I think you're just better off ripping it all in for value here, which is what I do. I'm all in, and then the villain snap calls. Let's go, we love seeing that. I show my pocket sevens, and then the villain shows pocket aces. So they thought they were trying to trap me on the turn, but no sir. We played the Uno reverse card, trapped them, and we end up scooping this whole pot. Massive hand to kick off this 2-5 video, and we're just getting started. Before we get into the next hand, I just wanted to take this opportunity to invite all of you to join the Anti-Gambling Gambling Club. Head over to Lowjack.com. We have a bunch of different anti-gambling gambling club t-shirts, hats, and hoodies in all different types of sizes and colors. So head over to Lowjack.com and join the club. But for now, let's get back into the gambling. Let's see if we can run good in this next hand. I'm under the gun with pocket nines. I open it up to 15, a passive hijack calls, and then an aggressive cutoff 3-bets it to 75. The action falls back to me here, and yeah, I really hate calling 3-bets this large out of position, but we are over 3.9k effective here, so I actually think I should be calling a lot here, particularly with a hand as strong as pocket nines, so that's what I do. And then the hijack folds, so we are heads up to a flop of queen 9-3 with 2 diamonds. Let's go, second time we hit the set. This is a setsy vlog, let's go. I check it over to the pre-flop aggressor who c-bets 100, and I didn't check raise my set last hand, but I think this is a good spot to do it in this one, particularly when we're this deep with the villain. I check raise it up to 250, which is definitely on the smaller side out of position. Probably could go a bit larger, maybe 350 would be better. Regardless though, I made a slight mistake, check raise small to 250, and I still get action from the button who calls. So we go heads up to the turn, which is the 4 of spades. Definitely going to continue to shovel money in this pot when my opponent calls to check raise on the flop. I think the chance they have a hand that's king queen or stronger, or maybe a combo draw, nut flush draw type thing is very likely, and there's a lot of value to get here. So I go ahead and bet 350. Again, I think a bit too small with the bet sizing. I wouldn't hate betting like 500 in this spot because I think I'm going to get called a lot. Regardless though, smaller sizing does work in the sense that I do get action because the villain does call. So we're still heads up to the river, which is the 10 of hearts. So the action's on me here, and obviously going to continue to bet my set for value here. Unfortunately on this street, I actually think my hands are a bit tight and I am forced to size down a bit. If the villain does have essentially king queen or an overpair, like they're bluff catching at this point, and a lot of stuff got there on this run out, like king jack got there on the river. They got to be worried that I might have a 2-pair combination on this board as well, or a set. So I just don't think I can expect a large bet to get paid off here. So this is kind of why it sucks that I did use smaller sizes on previous streets, because now my hands are tight and I have to use a smaller size. It's just, you know, betting a smaller size in a 1.3k pot, yeah, it sucks compared to betting a smaller size in a 2k pot, for example. Regardless though, I size down, I make it 500, and then the villain does call. I show my set and the villain throws their hand in the muck. So let's go, we do win another big pot for a 2-5 game, but this is why poker is a cruel mistress, because even when things go well, you're kind of left kicking yourself a bit because it could have gone even better. Next hand up, we got yet another button straddle on, and then a tight aggressive small blind makes it 40. A passive low jack calls, and then I'm in the hijack with the pocket kings, baby. I 3-bet it up to 150, and then the small blind rips it all in for 500. Hijack gets out of the way. I know 4-bets in Tampa are nutted, but not nutted enough for me to go ahead and fold pocket kings here. I throw in the call, the small blind shows pocket jacks. We are in absolutely phenomenal shape, and we end up holding across the run out and scooping a $1,000 pot. We are running good this session. Let's go. So if you couldn't tell, this was an absolutely action-packed game on a Friday night at the Seminole Hard Rock Tampa, and over a $5,000 stack here, and I'm under the gun with king jack of clubs. I go ahead and raise it up to 15. And then literally everyone at an 8-handed table calls my $15 bet. Action game, let's freaking go. Let's hope we smash the flop with this hand. The flop is 7-6-5 with 2 hearts. Yeah, we did not smash this flop. A loose aggressive big blind actually decides to lead out for 75, and no, I'm not a complete fish. I did actually fold my king jack high here. But I wanted to include this hand for some interesting things that happen. I end up folding, and the next 3 people fold before a passive cutoff raises it to 200. Then a passive button calls to 200 for the actions on a loose aggressive small blind who check raise 3 bets all in for 600. Wow. Strong line there. I mean, I guess you got to put him on 9-8, being that that's such a monster hand on this flop and there's so much action, they can get called by 2 pairs and sets. So yeah, GG small blind, it really looks like they have the nuts here. Then the big blind calls, and the cutoff is in the tank for maybe like 30 seconds before shoving all in for $1,000. Then the big blind tanks yet another 60 seconds before going all in themselves for 1,200. Then the big blind calls this bet. So we have 4 different people all in. We have 1 main pot and 2 different side pots for a total pot that is worth over $4,000 at a 2-5 game. This is absolutely insanity. And then no one wants to show their cards. The board runs out with a 9 of hearts, making any 8 a straight. And then the river's the king of hearts. Board didn't pair or anything. And then everyone in the hand just sort of like sits around, not wanting to show their cards yet, till eventually the button tables. 8-3 offsuit, and then everyone else mucks. So they end up scooping over $4,000, the whole pot, both of the side pots. They got it all in on the flop with just an open-ended straight draw. Literally no one had 9-8, even despite all that action on the flop. I guess everyone was sharing the same outs with flush draws and sets or 2 pairs on this board, but absolute monster hand that was scooped by 8-3. I mean, obviously I'm glad I got out of the way with my king jack. That was never good on that board ever, but wow, yeah, just one of the most action-packed games I've ever seen in Tampa. I ended up winning over $4,000 on that session, which was my biggest win in Tampa up to that point. After this massive all-in hand, the game did end up breaking because all of the players left, but wow, what a game. Of course, after that crazy session, I was still in the mood to play some poker. The very next day, I was back at the Seminole Hard Rock in a 2-5 game where this hand happened. Cut off open limps, and then I'm on the button with 7-6 spades. I go ahead and ISO raise it to 35. Then a loose aggressive big blind calls and the original limper folds. We're heads up to a flop of 10-6-3, rainbow with 1 spade. Big blind checks it over to me, and I could go either way with checking or betting here. Betting's good because it denies equity, but you're not going to go wrong with checking and inducing bluffs from a loose aggressive villain. In this instance, I went ahead and bet 25 and the big blind calls. So we're heads up to the turn, which is a beautiful one. It's a 7 of diamonds. Let's go. We do turn 2 pair. Big blind checks it over to me. Definite mix in. Get some value with my 2 pair here. I bet 80. And then villain check raises for 300. Wow, I was not really expecting that, but there is a bit of concern here because 9-8 got there on the turn, which villain probably has at least all the suited combinations of, potentially the offsuit ones. I don't really expect them to have the offsuit combinations, but yeah, still worried about 9-8 for sure. Slow played set, also somewhat possible. Or they could be bluffing. Any 8 or any 9, it does have a straight draw, which could be a high equity hand they're bluffing with. Maybe a trap with aces is also on the cards. So yeah, absolutely cannot be folding the 7-6 here, in my opinion. Don't want to flat either, because that would only leave the opponent with 440 behind. And if we're ahead here, we might as well get all the money in now, because they're not folding whatever they check raised unless it was complete air. I rip it all in for 740. The big blind does call. And then we're heads up. The river is the king of clubs. Shouldn't change much unless the opponent had king 10 somehow. Pocket kings maybe as a trap. But I end up showing my 7-6, and then the opponent shows Jack 10. So let's go. We're scooping this pot. Jack 10. The luck box a 2 pair on the turn, and we end up scooping it. Let's go. Next up, a +1 player limps, and then a tight aggressive low jack. Ices it to 25. Cut off calls, and then the actions on my small blind with ace king of spades. Definitely going to 3-bet this premium. I make it 110. Then the limper folds, the initial raiser calls, and the cut off folds. So we are heads up to a flop of king queen 3, rainbow with 1 spade. The action starts off on me, and probably a good board to go ahead and c-bet here. I decided to check it though, essentially just to try and induce bluffs from a tight aggressive opponent. Yeah, I think this is a mistake. I should just be c-betting for value here. I've really had a bias towards playing my strong hands passive in the past few videos. I've noticed it's not a good habit to pick up in my opinion. Regardless though, I did check it here, and then the low jack checks as well. So we're still heads up to a turn. Is the 6 of diamonds completing the 4-card rainbow. Now I catch up to where I should have been on the flop, and I do decide to try and get some value here. I bet 200, and then the low jack calls. So it heads up to the river, which is the 8 of diamonds. Still wanting to try and get some value here. If there was any utility to checking my top on the flop, it was that maybe it's a bit deceptive, and now maybe the opponent will call a bit lighter with their queen X combinations. I think they'll definitely call if they have like king jack or king 10 suited. So definitely want to bet for value here. I go ahead and make it 300, and then the low jack rips it all in for 690. And oh, this is an awful spot. Oh my god, I think the chances that the villain are bluffing are almost for certain that they're not, and they have a bunch of hands that beat us on this board. They trapped with pocket aces pre-flop. I wouldn't be shocked to see them continue to trap with that on the flop. If they did flop a set on the flop, I could also see them potentially trapping with that. King queen also beats us. So we just lose to like almost everything. And even if they did have something like Jack 10 suited, like, are they really going to try and bluff me off like a little bit over a min click? I extremely doubt it. I think almost for certain I'm no good here. As much as it is absolutely painful and sucks so much, like I'm playing a 2-5 game, saving $390 is completely worthwhile, in my opinion, if I'm absolutely positive the villain isn't bluffing, which, I mean, come on, look at this line. Of course they're not bluffing me for 390 more. So I do decide to fold the ace king as much as it hurts. I even tanked a fair bit, maybe like 30 seconds or so, looking pretty pained, but I do end up folding it. And then the villain was actually kind enough to show us the hand, and they did have pocket queens. Let's go. We do save a little bit of money there. The ironic thing is, if I played the hand more aggressively, I might have actually gotten stacked, but yeah, I mean, you can't be results oriented like that. I think the check on the flop is a pretty silly mistake, but glad I had the discipline to fold the river. Let's go. Next hand, we see 2 limpers before a loose aggressive cutoff raises it to 30. And then I'm in the small blind with ace king offsuit. I go ahead and 3-bet it up to 130. Both the limpers fold and the loose aggressive cutoff calls. So we heads up to a flop of 9-8-3 with 2 spades. We do have the ace of spades, by the way, but I still decide to check it over to the villain, essentially trying to induce a bluff from a loose aggressive opponent. Plus, if we bet and get called, things get pretty dicey on the turn. So I check it over to them, and they do go ahead and bet 150, and I think we have a pretty clear call here. We have showdown value with ace high, and the backdoor nut flush makes it even sexier to defend with this hand. So I do that, I throw in the call, and we're still heads up to a turn, which is the 3 of clubs. I check it over to the villain, and then they check back, and you might think like, I should be happy that I'm getting closer to showdown with my ace high, but the turn check actually does scare me a bit. I think a lot of villains' range are going to be one pair hands that sort of don't want to bet in case, I'm trapping with an overpair. So I think it's going to be a lot of 9x combinations, 8x combinations, and a bunch of those pocket pairs, so like pocket sixes, pocket fives, maybe even pocket tens. Pretty concerned I'm behind here until the river is the ace of diamonds. Let's freaking go. We hit that ace and we suck out on those hands. Definitely want to go ahead and bet for value because I don't really expect them to go ahead and bet any of that showdown driven range on the river. So I go ahead and bet 120, just really going small to try and give those hands a price to call. But then things get really interesting because the cutoff raises to 310. So actually a relatively small raise to the size of the pot. And it's pretty interesting because, yeah, I do give the opponent credit for like ace 9 and ace 8. Definitely a two pair combinations my opponent can have. But other than that, I don't know what else they could have. I really think a 3 would bet on the turn. I think a full house would bet on the turn. And like I said, when they check the turn, I think they do have a bunch of like 8x and 9x and pocket pair combinations. And it's like, they're a less aggressive opponent. Are they just turning those hands into a bluff here? They saw me bet small on the river, so they know I'm kind of weak, so they want to raise to put me to the test. I don't know. It seems kind of suspect that they would use such a small raise sizing if they were doing that, unless they have ace 9 or ace 8 specifically. I really don't think they were trapping with a full house on the turn. Maybe they're bluffing. So I throw in the call with my ace king, and then villain shows me ace 9. So there you go. I guess I get points for being right about what one of their value hands was, but unfortunately they had a value hand and I was wrong with my call. So GG to the villain, they got us here. But let me know, what would you do? Would you call the river raise? I was back on a Sunday playing poker yet again, and I noticed someone at the table is like recording poker hands with their phone, and I was like, oh yeah, do you have a vlog? And he's like, yeah, Poker Punks on YouTube. So if you want to check out Poker Punks on YouTube, there you go. This was a guy I played the next hand with as well. So let's get into that action. So there's a button straddle on and then a passive big blind limps. Then I'm under the gun with 8-7 of clubs. I also raise it up to 60. This is definitely too loose with a limp and a button straddle on, but folding is boring. I go ahead and mix it up to 60. And then my friend Poker Punks to my left in the Lowjack goes ahead and 3-bets it to 160. The action folds back to me, and I think getting this price, I have to call with my 8-7 suited. Honestly, I would rather call with this hand than I would a hand like King Queen, for example, just because it's going to have better equity against a value heavy range. So I throw in the call, and we're heads up to a flop of ace 8-6 rainbow with one club. I go ahead and check it over to the villain, and then they c-bet 150, and I think we have to call here. We do have a lot of backdoor equity with flush draws, straight draws, plus I mean, maybe one pair's good. I don't really expect it to be good, but I give the villain some credit for bluffing, maybe with King Queen suited or something like that. So I do throw in the call, and we're heads up to the turn, which is an absolutely beautiful one. It is the 10 of clubs. Let's go. We turn, way more equity. We now have a gut shot as well as our flush draw. I go ahead and check it over to the villain, who goes ahead and bets 235. So now the action's back on me here, and pretty interesting spot because I could call just to try and draw and then maybe lead all in on the river if we get there. But I think this might be a better spot to go ahead and check raise. It is going to put ace king and ace queen in an awful spot if we go ahead and check raise here. Like, they've got to be worried that I have ace 10 or I flopped a set, or even that I have a high equity draw against them. So I think I can credibly represent a lot of really strong hands here. 9-7 got there as well, which, I mean, I don't know if I have 9-7 suited in my range, but also another hand they could potentially lose to. So I just think to put ace X in a really gross spot, and the fact that this guy's a vlogger, maybe he's capable of making a big fold like that. Either way, we're going to find out, because I'm all in for 890, and then the Lowjack snap calls, like, beats me in the pot, and I'm like, oh shit, bad spot. I'm assuming they have a set, or they did just snap me off with ace king, and then the Lowjack does show me ace king. So yep, they're going to be ahead on this hand, but we still have a bunch of outs to improve to 2 pair, a straight or a set, and the river is 10 of spades. There's not one of our outs, and Poker Punks ends up stacking us in this hand. Good game, sir. If you're watching, shout outs to you and your channel. You made a good call on the turn, and if you guys want to check it out, Poker Punks on YouTube. But fuck you for winning the hand. Next up, a passive player limps under the gun, and then I'm on the button with queen jack of clubs. I ISO it up to 35, and the limper calls. So we go heads up to a flop of ace 10 8 rainbow with one club. So deceptively pretty good flop for us. We do have the double gut shot on this board. So when under the gun checks it over to me, good spot to go ahead and c-bet it as a bluff here, in my opinion. I make it 20, and then under the gun check raises to 75. The action's back on me here, and in position, I definitely don't think we can fold this hand. I too strongly suspect that the villain has two pair or a set on this board, just because I think they have probably a lot of offsuit ace 10 and 10-8 combinations, maybe even 10-8 offsuit as well. So yeah, it's a lot we lose to, but we have so many outs to improve. We essentially have an open-ended straight draw, so I can't go anywhere. It's particularly in position. I throw the call, so we do get to see that turn, which is the 4 of clubs. Great turn card. Not only do we have a double gut shot now, we also have a flush draw. So when the under the gun player goes ahead and bets 120, I think we have another pretty clear just call spot. I really don't expect the villain to fold any of their two pair or set combinations to a raise. So I think it's a good spot to just flat in position and try and realize our equity for as cheap as possible. I throw in the call, and then we are heads up to the river, which is 7 of clubs, baby. Let's freaking go. We get there with a second nut flush in a spot where the opponent has a very strong range, at least in my opinion. However, having said that, they do check it over to me, so that makes me a little less confident that their range is super nutted, but I mean, the SPR is a little bit over 1, so it's an absolute no-brainer decision to rip it all in. That's what I do. I go all in, and then the villain snap calls. So I'm thinking, okay, they did have a monster after all. I end up showing my flash, and then the villain goes, it ends up showing ace 8 offsuit. So there you go. They did flop one of those two pairs, but we absolutely luck boxed the runner flush. Let's freaking go. Next up, I'm in the hijack with ace 9 of spades. I go ahead and make it 15, and then a tight aggressive big blind calls. So we heads up to a flop of Queen 9-9 with 2 clubs. Let's freaking go. We flop the trips. When the big blind checks it over to me, I go ahead and bet 10 here. Honestly, I think I could go a bit bigger. Like, it's such a small pot for a 2-5 game. I should just be trying to inflate it. I really don't think the opponent's going to have much elasticity between 10 and 15. But whatever the case, small mistake, I went ahead and bet 10, and the big blind does call. So we're heads up to a turn, which is the king of clubs. Definitely not the best turn card in the world. Jack 10 gets in, as does the front door flush draw. But when the opponent checks it over to me, I still think it's a good spot to go ahead and bet for value, try and charge flush draws, and if my opponent does have king queen, like, obviously they're not going to fold that hand on this turn, so I definitely think there's still value to get here, although the opponent does have a lot of flushes in my range, so it kind of gets a bit dicey. I do decide to bet, however. I go ahead and make it 25. Then we get some bad news. The big blind check raises to 80. Now the action's back on me here, and I'm really not liking this spot. Like I said, the opponent has so many flushes in their range here. I'm very concerned I'm behind, but I suppose we do have some outs to improve to a full house or quads even. I suppose it's worthwhile pointing out that we are dead to a turn straight flush as well, but can't be too concerned about the monsters under the bet. I still think there's some EV here in flatting and trying to improve in the river. Plus, not totally impossible that the opponent is bluffing with like ace of clubs, jack of hearts or something like that. We did give them a really good price to call on the flop. So I throw in the call here, and we're heads up to the river still, which is the 2 of spades. Absolutely no help to us, and the villain does not slow down at all. They go ahead and bet 200 into 205. Really hating this spot. Really concerned that I'm losing to a flush. Jack 10, also a hand I lose to. Full houses I also lose to, but the flush is really the one that's got me concerned, because I raised 15 pre-flop, so even if they had 10-2 of clubs here, I would not totally be shocked. It's just a lot of flushes they can have. So as much as it sucks, I really think I have to fold my trips here, and that's what I did in game. The next up, a under the gun player limps, and then a loose aggressive Lowjack ices it to 25. A passive cutoff calls, and then the actions on my big blind with ace 5 of spades. Definitely a good hand to squeeze with. I go ahead and make it 130, and then the limper folds, but the 2 other players call. So we go 3 ways to a flop of 6-5-4 rainbow. Go ahead and check it here. I'm pretty concerned that either of the villains could have overpairs to this board and that I am behind. Plus, if this hand checks through, I'm kind of liking it with ace 5 because there's a good chance we have the best hand here, and if we check here, we can potentially induce bluffs from some of those hands. Yeah, so I think it's a pretty clear check spot in my opinion. I go ahead and check it, and then the Lowjack player rips it all in for 670. Like, almost 2x the size of the pot. Was definitely not expecting that. The cutoff player folds and the action's on me, and I won't waste much more of your time. This is like a pretty easy fold here. Like I said, I'm convinced they could have an overpair in there to this board, but even more than that they just really don't want like to see an ace or a king on the turn, something like that. Plus also possible they have a set or a flop straight and they're just playing it insane for some reason. Whatever the case, I end up folding my hand here, and then the villain ends up showing ace six of hearts. So there you go, we were behind, and GG the villain. We got another button straddle on this hand, and then the action's on my big blind, and I look down at the ladies, pocket queens, I raise it up to 50, and then I get a call from a loose aggressive hijack and a tight aggressive button straddle. So we go three ways to a flop of 7-6-5 rainbow. Definitely not the best board in the world for pocket queens, and I'm out of position to two people. I think this might be a good spot to protect my checking range with a strong hand like pocket queens here. Not that I would hate c-betting in this spot either. In this instance I did check it, and then the loose aggressive hijack goes ahead and bets 200. The button folds, the action's back on me here, and could go either way between check raising or calling, which I know is the second time I've said that this hand. I do decide to call in this instance, essentially trying to keep loose aggressive opponents' bluffs in their range. So I throw in the call, and then we're heads up to a turn, which is the ace of diamonds. Definitely not the best turn card in the world. I go ahead and check it over to the aggressor, who keeps aggressing. They go ahead and bet 250. Now I think we're in a pretty gross spot here. Definitely the opponent could have some ace-x combinations in their range, particularly the two-pair combinations, like they bet ace-6 on the flop because, you know, they wanted to deny equity to overcards. Now they're betting it for value. But I wouldn't be shocked either if they did have a worse overpair to my queens. Even pocket 8s or 8-7 would make a lot of sense as well, since it still is an open-ended straight draw, and it's kind of setting its price by betting now instead of having to check here and then face a bet on the river type thing. So it wouldn't shock me if they have one of those hands either. So I really don't want to fold my pocket queens here, but if I do give them credit for a bunch of 8x combinations, given the size of the pot, I actually think those hands will be priced in to call it check raise all in here. So I actually think this is a fold or all in spot, as insane as that might seem, as embarrassing as it might be if we do end up getting stacked by like ace deuce or something. I actually think this is a really good spot to either go all in or fold. And like I said, loose aggressive opponent, I give them credit for bluffs. I think they have a lot of bluffs on this board. So I'm ripping it all in with my pocket queens. I shove it for 700, and then the hijack thinks a little bit, which we love to see. We did not want to get snap called here. Before throwing in the calls, okay. We are heads up to the river, which is the jack of diamonds. Shouldn't be a scare card. I end up showing my pocket queens, and the villain ends up mucking. Let's go. We rake in the pot with the queens. A little bit curious as to what villain had. I think 8x is very likely, but definitely not going to badger him for an answer when I just beat him in a 1.9k pot at 2.5. Let's go. So I had time for one final session before I had to leave back for Australia. It was definitely kind of emotional actually leaving the Hard Rock. You know, I sort of complained at first about how the games were a bit tighter, but I wanted to learn them, and I think I put a lot of hours in, and I've learned a lot about how to play this game. And you know, it kind of sucked to see it all coming to an end, at least temporarily. We played this interesting hand on our last session there. So a loose aggressive hijack, open limps, then a passive button goes ahead and makes it 20, a passive small blind calls, and then the action's on my big blind with pocket 10s. I go ahead and 3-bet it to 110. Then things get interesting because the hijack back raises me to 300. Button and small blind fold, and the action's back on me here, and yep, we're still in Tampa, so a limp back raise 4-bet. It's pretty nutted, to be honest with you. It's pretty nutted. I don't think my 10s are good here. I should be folding, but I don't know what happened to me in this hand. I guess the emotions of leaving soon. I was happy to go back to Australia with Brennan and, you know, introduce her to family and stuff, but I don't know. I was just missing Tampa. I was definitely on some type of tilt here because I did not fold my 10s. I did not even flat the 300. I ripped it all in for 1,000. This is a pure pump. I gotta be honest with you guys. Absolutely awful play. I think the chances that the hijack has aces or kings are almost like for certain. Taking the limp raise, back raise, 4-bet line. Like, I should be folding queens here, let alone going all in with 10. So pure pump in this spot. I gotta be honest with you guys. I'm essentially just giving away like $1,000 to the villain for a pretty low equity spot for myself. But enough of beating myself up. I rip it all in. The villain snap calls, and what do you know, they end up showing pocket aces. So we do have our 18% equity. We've beat aces with 10s all in pre-flop before, and the flop is king queen jack with 2 hearts. So there you go. We turn an open-ended straight draw. We're really rooting for villain to hit their set at this point. The turn is the 4 of spades. Got to be no help for us. We still do have 6 outs to improve to our straight to crack the aces. And the river is Queen of spades. So there you go. We don't end up winning that hand, which is fair enough because villain had us absolutely smashed pre-flop. This was the last interesting hand I did play before heading back to Australia. And honestly, there's something poetic about this hand because if you guys remember back to the first video I did playing 2-5 in Tampa, the very first hand, the interesting hand I played, I actually got pocket 10s all in pre-flop against pocket aces and ended up winning. But that was a hand where I sort of figured out that people's 3-bets and 4-bet ranges in Tampa were pretty nutted, and it's poetic. The universe coalesced to end up, I lost the money that I won from that hand, giving out the bad beat. It's also disappointing that even like over 2 months later, I still didn't learn my lesson folding to 3-bets and 4-bets in Tampa. Wow, what an absolute roller coaster these past few sessions in Tampa were. But the time had come, I had to leave the United States, and Brendan and I hopped on the plane. It was about a 24-hour trip to get back to Australia. To see what happened when I arrived in Australia, make sure you hit the subscribe button because that's what my next video is going to be about. But for now, I'm out of here. Peace.